Chi podcast. I decided to do something a little bit different and have a series of different streams for my podcast. So this stream is People of the Path. These are the people that I've met in my journeys and introducing you to their perspective and what their mission is and what they're trying to achieve. And hopefully this is a place where you can learn more about people that are trying to live out their purpose. So I'm pleased to present you Jackie G, my friend and first guest on the Chi podcast,
so we
People of the Path.
Jackie here on the Chi podcast. Jackie, did you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, Jeremy. It's lovely to see you again. Long time.
Absolutely.
So I guess the first thing that I'd like to start off with is Jeremy's interviewing me from, I guess, one of my platforms called Rise and Reconnect. And Rise and Reconnect is just a platform where I express the parts of myself that I feel my current circle isn't quite ready to see and isn't quite adapted to. I've always been, I guess, one of the boys, and I've had like a circle of guys around me for most of my life. I've always been hardworking, very business and money focused. When I was in my early 20s, I was about to buy a house. I was working 3 jobs. Shortly after buying a house, I started a business. I was very science focused, very, very logical, and
very much in the masculine energy.
Very much in the masculine energy, despite being in a heterosexual relationship. So it was very, very interesting. And then my life, I guess you could say my life fell apart, but it was by choice when I was 27. And everything changed, again, by choice, because I wasn't happy with any of the aspects of my life. I wasn't happy with my job. My business wasn't really lighting my spark. My relationship didn't feel like it was going where I wanted it to. My house didn't have the energy that I wanted it to have. And I pretty much turned my life upside down. I left my relationship and I left my job and I left the country. I did what I'd almost say everybody should do if they don't know what they want, is just get some space and step away from it all. And I did that in a way where it wasn't even possible for me to come back, if that makes sense, and change my mind within a week. And then I sort of began this really beautiful journey of self-discovery and I guess uncovering what I want and where I want to be. I don't know if how much of your audience is into astrology, but I'm really, really very quite big on astrology, and not just how you can use it to kind of understand someone else's personality as well as yourself, but also as a means of understanding where you're at in your life. And I'm currently going through my Saturn's return, which means there's going to be a lot more change and a lot more self-discovery and uncovering. But I guess those are still things to come. Like, we're all learning and we're all on our own journey and heading in a specific direction. So I guess we'll see what comes of it. I don't know. Was there anything specific that you wanted to know, Jeremy? Or I feel like that's quite a good recap. The irony is as well is that I'm back in the job that I was working in before, and I'm also back running my business, and I've just picked up a second job, and I feel myself being pulled back into that masculine, but I'm trying to understand whether I just need to take all of that approach from a feminine energy, or maybe if this is just going to be a financial foundation for me to create something bigger in the not so distant future. So
yeah, that's always a hard one to work out. But I guess I like to go with whatever you feel that you're being drawn to, and you have energy and you're feeling, if you feel like you have energy to put into working right now, then that's probably something to follow. If you're starting to get to the resistance is building and you're like, I'm working and I'm doing it because I mentally feel I should, but I'm feeling like it's just not serving me, then that's probably a different thing together.
Yeah. And it's also quite interesting when you're talking about resistance and those sorts of things, because like, just because I'm enjoying it and this is where I feel that I'm thriving, it doesn't mean that it's actually going to light my spark. I think I'm just coming back to something that's comfortable and something that I know that works. And I think the funny thing about life is that it almost teaches you that there's an age and a stage and a phase where you can do the thing that works, but you're not meant to continue doing that throughout your whole life. You're not meant to use the same old tricks to do the same old things to achieve the same old results. That's not what we're here for. You used it back then to get the result that you wanted. You got the result. Now it's time to move on. So
yeah, definitely. And I think we've all got our own specific journey. Like for me, if I were to relate where you're at, I feel like I'd like to try a lot of different things, especially in the workplace and like different types of jobs. And then once I've kind of got that perspective and had that experience, I'm like, okay, I get this. And then I'll move on to something else. And early year, when I dipped back into paid employment, it felt like the right thing to go to the mines. Like there was a lot of green lights, if you would say, that were sending me that way. Like the
lack of resistance and abundant opportunity almost. Yeah.
Exactly. Like the relationship I was in folded, the car I had in Adelaide broke down, the house I was in I had to give back, and you know, my life in Adelaide neatly folded up and put it in a package. Opportunity to go to the mines, and you know, natural, obvious choice of where the universe is directing you. But then I went there and I really wanted to work, not so much for the money, that was a part of it, but more so just to regain a sense of certainty. I think when you chase your dreams and you get to a point of feeling that resistance of uncertainty, because often your dreams require you to go through a lot of growth and go into what's unfamiliar. And before going back to work, I came up to a point where I felt like the resistance and the uncertainty and the fear was too much to get through. So I had to just turn away and go back to what I knew, which was paid employment. And when I did that, that was helpful for about 3 months. And it gave me that sense of certainty. It kind of like built up my energy where I was like, okay, yeah, you know what? I'm ready to have another go at diving into my dreams. And so I feel like sometimes doing that paid employment or whatever it may be can be what you need to do at that time, but then to recognize when it served you and then the next thing you want to go on to without getting caught up in the momentum of just doing it because that's what you've always done.
Mundane, day to day, and getting stuck in almost like that trap of security and habit and comfort and things like that. It's also really interesting how you talk about flow, and it sounds like you and I are very similar in the aspect that when you make a decision, whether it's an easy decision or a hard decision, and then all of a sudden your life is just full of all these opportunities that are leading you down this path and things are happening easily without resistance, it's almost like a big green light that says, this is the path that you're meant to take. And I know a lot of people talk about struggle and if you know what you want, strive for it no matter what. And I think there is a certain degree of that in everything that we should do. Like we shouldn't just give up because something's difficult. But looking at it from the other aspect, I really feel that if something is meant to be happening, then it will happen easily. Like when I did go through that huge life change, about, I think it's coming up to 3 years ago now. When I did go through that huge life change, within the space of a week, I'd gone from being in a full-time job, being in a relationship and living in my house, to being accepted for a job in Vietnam, no longer being in the relationship, and having found somebody to rent my house from me. And that's almost unheard of. Do you know what I mean? I barely had $1 to my name. I'm not from a well-off family. And my mum was just like, you can borrow some money for your plane tickets to get you to Vietnam. Everything lined up and everything happened really quickly. And within 2 weeks, I was in Vietnam from making the decision that I needed to leave everything that I was at. And it did happen very easily. Don't get me wrong, being in Vietnam was very hard, but that was the ease comes so that I could be in that position and have that internal learning, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And to kind of weigh in on my perspective for what you just spoke about, I kind of see that as whenever you decide to take action from your comfort zone onto a new path that you know is going to be the best for your self-expansion or your growth as a self, your self-development, typically in the beginning when you actually take action to get onto that path, it's supported and you get all those green lights and it's easy. The difficult part is having the courage to step out of that and get on the path, and then you kind of get like almost like a little bit of a help from the universe to encouragement to keep going. The difficulty then a little bit later, where the path gets to a certain point and then resistance builds, maybe challenges your commitment, a temptation to go back to paid employment, whatever it may be. Where it's like, oh, you want to go on the path, well, you had it easy. Let's see how it goes when it gets tough, when you actually get challenged. I think, you know, a lot of us can really get caught in that where it's like, oh, this isn't working or it's too hard. I'll just go back to what is easy. But we go back to what's easy and we find that it's not fulfilling anymore.
Completely agree. It's all very, very interesting. And I think it's just funny and interesting to hear how different people choose to see these opportunities. And it's all about the external makes it easier for you so you can tolerate the internal struggle that you're experiencing through the process.
Yeah, absolutely. There's an interesting point. There was a few actually from your introduction that I'd love to circle back to, which was about the masculine energy that you were experiencing as a female in Australia. And I feel that that's quite commonplace now, especially in Australia, where there's a lot of females embodying the masculine energy. And I guess there's always going to be a bit of feminine and masculine in each person, but it really seems like females in Australia have like taken up that masculine energy and the guys are in the feminine a lot more now. Have you noticed that?
I guess I can only really speak for myself and my choices and what was going on for me at the time. I naturally tend to lack a lot of deep trust for people, and a lot of my decisions have come from a place of I can't rely on anyone but myself. So the choice, and I guess those are very masculine thoughts, like the masculine is the provider and security and all those sorts of things. So all of these sorts of decisions were coming from a place of I can't rely on somebody else to do the things for me that I want to achieve, to provide me with the lifestyle that I want to have. So I need to do this myself. And that's kind of what comes with the very masculine lifestyle, the masculine decisions. And I don't know how many people that are listening have lived their life in the feminine and lived their life in the masculine and have been able to see the polarity between the two, but they're both so different. It's almost like when I'm in my masculine, I'm being driven by ego and rather than by love, if that makes sense, and driven by, and I'm not saying the masculine is selfish, but I felt that my drive was from more of a selfish place rather than a place of unity, and it was from a place of scarcity and protection rather than a place of like abundance and sharing and bringing two people together. It was more of me setting up a wall so that I could have more control in my life over everything, including my relationship, including my lifestyle. It meant that I wouldn't be afraid to make a decision because at the end of the day, I had my back and I knew I was going to be okay.
Yeah, and that can be one side of the masculine where you can really put up that wall and just like contract into like a, you know, really rigid force blocked off. And I guess if you think about it, masculine is force and power, whereas feminine is more gentle and love. And you have a balance of power and love, then you've got wisdom in between. Which, you know, on one side you've got discipline and one side you've got nurture, and it's quite difficult. You know, I think to some degree, we all go through that, because it's really easy to get into your masculine energy. You know, when you're quitting something, you're like, that's it, I'm not having it at all. But sometimes it's beneficial to actually have that, which would be nurturing, but then discipline again to not have it, which is something I've been experiencing lately. But also, I just want to quickly add that with regards to how you're experiencing the masculine, so I've experienced probably two sides of masculine and two sides of feminine in my own life, where there's a healthy masculine or divine masculine and an toxic masculine, and the same for feminine. And the divine masculine is really that creator essence, where you feel that, you know, you're the father figure, not in a patriarchal way, but just in a like everyone's your brother, and like, yeah, there's like really beautiful energy to it. But likewise, when you divine feminine, that's quite a beautiful energy too, with like intuitive nature and just like loving. And yeah, so it's interesting to see that there's both sides, but then there's, you know, a top and a bottom level, or however you want to frame it.
Yeah, and I also think that it's hard to understand what being in the divine masculine is like, or being in the divine feminine, if you've never actually experienced that. And then you can look back and go, wow, maybe my feminine was quite weak, or my masculine wasn't healthy. And you don't know that unless you experience more. So I guess it's one of those things where you just kind of have to move through the journey, and identifying as well whether it is your masculine or whether it is your feminine that is unhealthy and needs to be built upon to be brought closer to the divine, is again something else that you need to identify, because weak feminine and weak masculine can have similar attributes, or a woman operating more in her masculine may think that she's just operating in her masculine, when really it may be her feminine that's not where it should be at. So there's lots of things that you kind of need to, I guess, think about and take on board. And
that's right. And then I'm sure sometimes you could be balanced from a bit of masculine and feminine, some in the unhealthy of each, and yeah, it gets blurred. You're not always just polarized one way or the other.
Yeah, and it's definitely, I know in my experience, my energy is very affected by my external. So if I'm in working environments a lot, I will be pulled into my masculine. If I'm in a relationship where I don't necessarily trust the person is able to carry me and is able to get the job done, then I'll be in my masculine. And the opposite happens if I'm in a relationship where I have trust that the person's going to be able to do things. It's very interesting for me to witness how deep into my feminine I get pulled, where it's almost to a point where, because I'm not used to operating in that place for so long, so often in a relationship, that I can see the cracks and the falters in it. And I guess it sort of brings out like another side. And it can be, I guess the point of what I'm saying is, there's only so much that you can do and identify internally and within yourself and on your own. But it's when you're in relationships and in connection with others and around the energy of other people that you really can identify the pull of where your energy is going and what's coming out and what it's bringing out. And it'll often be stronger than what it normally is when you're in your own essence.
I agree completely. Yeah, you can definitely get to a certain level of self-development by yourself, and sometimes it's almost beneficial to not distract yourself with relationships and have that time to really understand yourself, be with your own energy, stabilize it, develop it. But then it comes to a certain level where it is necessary to have other people around to challenge your strength of vibration or certainty of self, you know, because let's say you're meditating and you're calm, and then in an undistracted environment, that's fine. But then you go out where someone triggers you, it's going to be a lot harder to maintain that calmness. And I think it's important to kind of have that, reveal weaknesses in your resolve.
Definitely, completely agree. Balance of the both.
There was a point that I wanted to make when you said about going over to Vietnam and like, you know, completely uprooting yourself. I think that's a beneficial thing that everyone should do, where you basically lose yourself to find yourself back. Like you've gone back into work and you've picked up a lot of things you were doing, but at least when you've separated from that and you can look back objectively at the experience that was your life, you can go, was that serving me or was it? And I feel like when you're within, say, a friendship group, a tribe, you typically have to conform to how that tribe see you, because if you as Jackie that you know, works and drinks with the lads or whatever, and then you're like, I'm gonna go do yoga and meditate, and they'll be like, what? A lot harder to really embrace who you want to be. Whereas, you know, whenever you separates, they go off on their own self-growth and then reconnect, and it's like, oh, this is who you are now, and then they've got the chance to accept that or not. But when you try and break free from the mold, it can be a lot harder. Hopefully we all have friends that are growth friends that want to support our highest growth, even if it means they have to go off for a year. I think a lot of our formative friends and legacy friends, as I call them, you know, people that you grew up with in high school, can be the ones that want to keep you kind of like doing the same things over, although not always, but can be the case.
Do you think that's because they're stuck in their own life and they don't want you to excel subconsciously? Do you know what I mean? Like I'm the same, so you should be the same too. I'm not different. I still do the things and the stuff. Why aren't you doing them with me?
Yeah,
So,
that's right. On the surface level, it would be, oh, what, you're no fun no more, you're not drinking, like, what are you doing? On a deeper level, it's you're not drinking, that's a reflection that maybe I shouldn't be drinking. And then it's easier to bring you back into what they're doing than it is to go, good on you, I support that, because it makes them feel uncomfortable about what they're doing. Can be, at least.
But sometimes it's not even the friend's reaction that's the problem. Like a lot of my friends know that I chop and change and do all sorts of weird stuff. And my personality is very dynamic and there's lots of different shades of light that shine from me. So they're already aware of that. And sometimes I feel they probably see more of me than what I see. But in saying that, when I am around them, because I want to please them and I want them to be happy and I want them to have, I guess, the best experience of me, I do find myself putting on old hats that I chose to let go of for a reason, but I'm putting them on because I want the person that's with me or the people that are with me to be happy. And I think that's a subconscious pattern that you also need to be aware of. Sometimes it's not their response, but it's your desire to want them, I don't know, for it to feel like how it used to feel almost. Not for it to be how it used to be, but to feel how it used to feel.
I totally get it. I think if you know that that's a way that your interaction was enjoyable for them and you're going to naturally go back to what used to work in the past. But yeah, that's a good point. I guess, brings up questions of, it's probably more optimal to go in and be your new authentic self. It depends, I guess, if you want to maintain the relationship how it was or you want to kind of bring them with you on your new growth journey.
I think you end up finding your feet as you go almost. And I guess that's what happens where like some friends drop away, you make new friends. Some relationships get stronger, some dynamics change. Like I've got a very close friend who you actually know, Jeremy, and she and I, we met in town out drinking, and a lot of our friendship was based around drinking and partying. But we're about the same age and we're both going through the same experience together, where we're getting a pull towards living in maybe a more of a like spiritual type of light, and we both like see the aspects of each other showing. Both of us still step back into our old ways and let loose and get a bit silly at our own detriment, but then both of us are also identifying that and going, wow, this needs to change. So I guess this is a friendship that has evolved over time in the same sort of direction. Initially, the circumstances that we met on were not ideally the same circumstances that we'd like to be living now, if that makes sense, or at least on an ongoing basis, or more than once a year. So yeah.
It's quite beautiful when you can be in that same space and go, hey, this isn't where I want to be. Like, hey, me neither. And then you can kind of help each other navigate your way out of it.
Yeah, but it's almost organically happening. Like, we're not even having those conversations. It's just happening, and we're both interested in what each other's doing. And
Cool.
we are, I'd say, even though she and I both perceive the world very, very differently, we both have operated from the same places in the past. She comes from her masculine a lot, as so do I. She's had a lot of business and money focus, as have I in the past. So it is very interesting to see, I guess, the synchronicities in both of our timelines. And I guess sort of where we're both going with that. So
yeah, definitely. Nice. I wanted to just draw attention to the fact that it's quite hilarious that we've come pretty full circle since when we met.
Yeah, this is a great story, honestly. And I guess it all kind of ties back to if I never went to Vietnam, I literally wouldn't be sitting in this chair having this conversation with you. After going to Vietnam, I really enjoyed the lifestyle of traveling with little thought, just a suitcase, very little organization. It was just me, so I had nobody else that I was accountable for. There was nobody else I had to be responsible for, and I'm I'm very good at accepting when I'm in a bad situation and it's my fault, and I'm like, okay, I got myself here and that's okay. I made this decision and that's okay. It's all part of the learning, all part of the journey. So I did a lot of solo traveling over a couple years, and it was my last trip to Bali. Was it my last trip or was it my second to last? I feel like it was my last trip. Yeah. Because it was right before COVID happened. It was my last trip to Bali, and rather than just going to see my same friends on the island that they live, and helping them out in their hostel, I stayed at another place, and it was my last day there. And I have a few local friends, and my local friend was going to pick me up first thing in the morning, and it didn't end up happening. He asked if he could pick me up at lunchtime, and I remember waking up and I was like, yes, I can sleep in. And then I was like, oh, but there is also yoga on. Maybe I should probably go to the yoga class. And I didn't want to. I wasn't feeling the best, but I went anyway. The yoga class was okay. And I really wanted to leave straight away as well at the end of the class, but everyone done that thing where they all sit down and have a chat. And I was like, okay, I'll stay to the chat rather than be the only one that's like, all right, bye. I don't have anywhere to go, but I just don't want to not feeling this. And it was so funny because we were all going around and just talking about who we are and where we're from, as you do when you're in a hostel. And you spoke and you're like, yeah, I'm Jeremy. Like, I'm from Australia. And I was like, oh, like, because it's not, I don't know how many of you have been to Bali, but it's not often that you meet Australians in Bali, or at least in the parts of Bali that I was at. I think it was off-peak season. So it doesn't, like, you don't often meet them. So I was like, oh, cool, another Australian. It was probably the second one that I'd met in a week. And then you said you were from Adelaide. And I was like, no, like... No way. I just found that so ironic. And it was really interesting because when you and I sat down and got talking, and normally the first thing I ask people is what star sign they are. The night before, literally the night before, I was having a good chat with one of the girls that I'd met in my hostel, and she was talking about Scorpios and the interaction that they can have together. And I was just like, well, where's my Scorpio man? When am I going to meet one? And it happened the next day, which I think was so very, very interesting. But I guess the irony of all of this, other than the fact that it's almost 2 years on and we're still very good friends now, the irony of all of this is that we sat down and we spoke for about 4 hours, and the only reason why the conversation ended was because my friend was there to pick me up. And part of that conversation was me being the very first person that you recorded a travel conversation with,
Yeah.
to my surprise and without my permission. So
I was naive and trying to capture the moment, perhaps in not the best, most
no,
integrity way. Of course, I told you in the moment.
after, of course, I was slightly mad, but not mad enough. and now we are, sitting here a couple of years down the track. And I'm I guess the feature of your first podcast. Sorry, what was that?
No, I was just about to say exactly what you did, that you could be the first person to feature on the podcast.
Why not? I think we always have interesting chats. Yeah, full circle. It's so good.
Definitely. Nice. Awesome. Well, let's leave it there. How can people connect with you?
Instagram is probably the platform that I use the most. And I guess it depends what people want to connect with. So I do work with natural therapies for dogs, and that's been my business for quite some time. But I guess if you want to see the side of me that I've been talking about during this podcast, and I guess see my self-expression and see where that goes and see what that turns into, Rise and Reconnect on Instagram is probably definitely the best place to, I guess, check things out and see where I'm at, and I guess see the many dynamics of where I'm going and what's happening, and I guess use it as a vehicle for you to feel safe to be your full expression as well, and to understand that you won't always be operating from the place that you necessarily want to be, and that you might slip back into old habits or old ways or old friendship groups, and that happens, but to always keep in the back of your mind of where you want to go and to feel safe expressing those parts of yourself.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, I think you brought across a really beautiful energy during this podcast, and yeah, I enjoyed your perspective, so I'm sure many others will too. So I'll chuck up some links and make sure they can find you.
Thank you. And I appreciate the time. As always a good chat. So nice to
Definitely.
bounce ideas off you.
Anytime. Until next time.
Until next time.
And there we have the very first Chi podcast of People of the Path featuring Jackie from Rise and Reconnect. I'm really glad that I was able to conduct this podcast and host it, even despite feeling less than authentic at this stage. And it was just something that had to take action, accept myself in a lower state than where I really felt was optimal, but just kind of roll with it and be myself even in a lower state and deem that as acceptable. So hopefully you got value from that, and there should be some links on screen or below, and let me know what you thought. This is JC Jeremy Jezza from Chi Coaching.